Chapter 30. On the same night, a woman was walking on a stone path. There were many copper figurines on the two sides of the stone path. There were many formations on these figurines that could easily kill Realm 4 cultivators. This woman was unusually beautiful. The two attendants behind her were also beautiful, but compared to her, they seemed to be young children. Her beauty was not that kind of beauty or seductiveness, but a dignified, dazzling, and admirable kind of beauty. Her beauty contained peerless majesty. On both sides of her, the shadows of the majestic palace seemed to be cowering on both sides of the stone path, prostrating themselves at her feet. She was the empress of the Qin dynasty, the mistress of Chongling. Even though her features were flawless and perfect, and even her hairline seemed to have been drawn by the best artist in the world, not many people in Chongling dared to look seriously at her face. At this time, a masked cultivator dressed in almond-yellow brocade robes was waiting for her at the end of the stone path in front of her study. He did not dare to look up at her, and kept his body slightly bowed, respectfully, his head bowed, filled with respect and nervousness. While he did not dare to look up, this cultivator's mental power followed her feet. He knew that this most noble woman of the Qin dynasty did not like formalities and did not like to waste words. The moment he sensed her feet were about to stop, this cultivator said as respectfully as possible, "Empress, today, Bureau Chief Yi went to the Divinity Bureau to inspect Song Shinshu's body and confirmed that it was the 9-death silkworm divine art. However, that person's cultivation was very low at most energy refinement realm." The Empress' footsteps stopped. Each of her movements was noble, dignified, and perfect, including her slightly lowered head to look at this cultivator's movements and expression. Her expression did not change at all. Tell the family that someone who was able to kill Song Shinshu in energy refinement realm did not just obtain the cultivation method of the 9-death silkworm, but also tell the family not to be nervous and not to do anything special in this period of time. The current Qin dynasty is no longer the Qin dynasty of 10 years ago. No one can threaten the current Qin dynasty as long as we don't make any mistakes, she said calmly, her voice full of dignity. Yes. This cultivator was shocked and continued. Today, Marquis Su intercepted Bureau Chief Yi outside the Divinity Prison. The two fought and were evenly matched. The Empress said, "In that case, do not think of relying on anyone in Chongling to deal with her. Didn't Bai Shanshui of the Cloud Water Palace appear recently? Let the family focus all their efforts on Bai Shanshui. As long as we find out about Bai Shanshui, since he's sealing his back, she will naturally be responsible for this matter." This cultivator grew even more serious and asked, "Today, Du Qingjiao of White Goat Cave came out of the mountain and interfered in the matter of a gang. The family wishes to hear your opinion. Nyang Nyang." Is the family getting more and more confused recently? The Empress said, since the Holy One has agreed to Du Qingjiao's retirement, and White Goat Cave has paid the price for its mistake, the family does not need to consider this problem. Tell the family members for me that while the Holy One is focused on cultivation and wants longevity, it does not mean he is different from before. His decree represents the final result. While the family is strong, it is only strong by standing behind the Holy One. Never think of going over the Holy One to do something, and do not think of changing things that have already been decided. Even though the Empress' voice was still calm, this cultivator could hear the powerful threat and warning. His back couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Also, have the family warn Liang Lian. What he did was too simple and crude. Chongling is not like fighting against an enemy country. We need gentler methods. Chongling's waters are deep. Never think you can easily crush anyone. The Empress started to move. She walked past this cultivator and into the study. This cultivator's clothes were completely soaked. He sensed the presence of the Empress next to him. While the Empress' words and actions did not change from usual and were still so perfect, he always felt that this mistress, who was the mother of the world, was a bit different than usual. The Empress sat down on the phoenix chair in the study. In front of her was a living spring. The bubbles coming out of the spring gave off large amounts of visible milky white spirit energy that was astoundingly nourishing to the energies of cultivators. In the dense spirit energy, there were multiple pure white lotus flowers that were as perfect as her. Above the spirit spring was a courtyard. Under the refraction of some crystals on the roof, the starlight within miles seemed to be refracted and fell into this spirit spring. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. People who are too outstanding and go to extremes are more likely to be envied by the heavens. The Empress looked calmly at the spirit spring in front of her and said softly, "Only knowing what you want, but not what other people want, this is the greatest sin. I do not know what you were thinking before you died. And if you realized, but since you have been dead for so many years, can you still not be at ease?" She slowly looked up. Her gaze seemed to pass through the falling starlight and spread out along the flat and straight roads of Chongling. Her expression gradually became imperfect, becoming excessively cold, but a kind of dark flame appeared in her eyes. Even if you left something behind, you should hide it well, so that you will not be completely erased. This way, you can leave some traces in this world. This way, future people will know that your footprints once existed in this dynasty. After all, because of you, we were able to destroy the Han dynasty, the Zhao dynasty, the Wei, the Qin dynasty, and Chongling like this. Blinding beauty, unusual majesty, and a face as cold and perfect as the gods in the temples. At this moment, she did not seem like a woman of the mortal world, but a god of legend. Yet she said to herself in an even colder tone, "You should know, in this world there are no gods. Every person is made of flesh and blood and has emotions and desires. People who don't live for themselves are truly detestable." Then, even more detestable expression appeared on her flawless face. She even gave off strong hatred and resentment. "And you have an heir. Your 9-death silkworm was left behind. Your 9-death silkworm, your sword essence, if you want to pass it on, you should pass it on to me. You passed it on to someone else, and not me." Just like usual, Ding Ning woke up at sunrise, watching Zhang Sun Qianshua's back as she dressed up. Then he quickly finished washing up and helped Zhang Sun Qianshua make millet porridge. When the time was about right, he used a small fire to simmer it. Then he took his own bowl to the shop he frequented to buy noodles. The reason for this was because Zhang Sun Qianshua was obsessed with cleanliness and did not like to eat outside food. Also, after a long period of cultivation, she was used to this kind of light and simple diet. Other than making wine, Ding Ning took care of Zhang Sun Qianshua for all the chores in the wine shop, from food to accommodation. Yet Ding Ning did it very carefully and willingly. Even when he was helping Zhang Sun Qianshua make porridge, watching the flames burn, and watching Zhang Sun Qianshua walk around nearby, he would feel very warm and happy, because some things were best not thought of, but some people had to be cherished. The person who died did not see Zhang Sun Qianshua clearly and did not even have enough time to see her, but he finally saw her clearly. After finishing a large bowl of noodles, Ding Ning washed the bowl with the remaining heat as he watched Zhang Sun Qianshua eat porridge. He said softly and seriously, "Soon, Wang Taishu's people will come to take me to White Goat Cave. I promise that if I can come out, I will come back to cultivate with you, so do not be impatient. You should know that the situation last time was very dangerous." Zhang Sun Qianshua glanced at him and did not respond. She continued to eat porridge in small mouthfuls. Looking at her expression, Ding Ning could not help but laugh, because he knew she had agreed. The sound of a carriage sounded in the quiet alley in the morning and stopped in front of the wine shop. That should be the carriage that Wang Taishu had sent to take Ding Ning away. But Ding Ning sat motionlessly and waited silently. Zhang Sun Qianxue frowned slightly. Chapter 31. The gray-robed swordsman from yesterday was waiting at the door of the wine shop. Seeing Ding Ning walk out of the shop, this gray-robed swordsman did not say anything, just nodded in greeting. After Ding Ning boarded the carriage, he started to travel in silence. Sitting in the carriage, Ding Ning smiled slightly. It was not a coincidence that Wang Taishu had been able to stand in Chongling for so many years. Just like the choice of this carriage driver, it suited Ding Ning's preferences. The carriage followed the straight path and slowly drove towards White Goat Gorge outside the city. That was where White Goat Cave was. In the first year of Yuanwu in the Qin dynasty, most of the cultivation places were not close to Chongling. These scattered cultivation sects and the territories of some powerful families outside Chongling naturally formed fortresses other than the armies of the Qin dynasty. As Chongling grew larger, more than half of the sects were located inside Chongling. While these sects still had special privileges, the Qin dynasty's control over these sects had grown stronger. In the eyes of many cultivation sects with histories longer than the present Qin dynasty, the only benefit was that they could more easily obtain cultivation resources and have more opportunities to learn from other sections. The carriage passed by Willow Forest River. Ding Ning heard many gasps and cries from inside the carriage. He did not open the curtains because he knew that the sounds were due to the many corpses floating in the river. Last night was no different for most of the residents of Chongling. If Ding Ning had not experienced it personally, he would not have known that the power of the streets of Chongling had changed greatly overnight. Willow Forest River's water was only used to irrigate some fields, so it was often used by gangsters to throw corpses. Last night, only Tang Ke and Tang Mengchen had died in Red Charm Tower. But Ding Ning knew that in the long night, more people from Jinlantang would die. Right now, their corpses should be floating in this river. Chongling's terrain was distributed in a staircase from the southeast to the northwest. South of the city was the Wei River and Jing River's tributaries. They were all plains, and occasionally there were some small hills less than 100 meters high. The center of Chongling was a slightly higher mountain range. Many of these areas were depressions left behind after ancient riverbeds dried up. The north of Chongling was filled with highlands and hills. There were 13 mountain ridges of various sizes. The tallest were Stone Gate Mountain and Spirit Void Mountain. The shortest were North General Mountain and Horse Blocking Mountain. The White Goat Gorge, where White Goat Cave was located, was in North General Mountain. Ding Ning's carriage finally entered White Goat Gorge after half a day of bumpy travel along the gradually ascending mountain path. Chapter 32. Zhang Yi's gaze was gentle, a gentleness that easily aroused trust. He never seemed to stare at one person, but he seemed to be looking at everyone, so no one would feel they were ignored. Just like now, when Ding Ning's gaze landed on him, Zhang Yi also noticed him and nodded gently at him. A mere White Goat Cave had such a person? Ding Ning sensed the other's presence and was truly shocked. I understand. I know I cannot compare to eldest senior sect brother in any aspect, but I also understand something. No matter what White Goat Cave is like today, or in the future, White Goat Cave has never had trash, and no one who would embarrass us. The tender youth named Shun Bai took a deep breath. Due to his agitated mood, he could not help but clench his fists. Since eldest senior brother has said so, we will not vent our anger on him. However, if he wants to enter the sect, he must at least make us feel that he has the qualifications to enter. He must also pass some of the tests that we have for him to enter. Zhang Yi's gaze landed on Ding Ning again. Looking at this young man whose eyes were calm and collected from beginning to end, his eyes also revealed a strange luster. The entrance test is not so important. You should know that even if one passes, the final decision is in the hands of the cave master. Since the cave master has agreed, then he is the little sect brother of White Goat Cave. Blocking here is a lack of etiquette and camaraderie, Zhang Yi said softly. Also, I can guarantee that this little sect brother will have great accomplishments in the future. Who can speak lightly of the future? I do not care about the future and only believe in the present. Seeing that the resentment of the students in front of the mountain gate had gradually subsided under Zhang Yi's gentle words, a cold voice came from the mountain path behind him. This voice caused the gray-robed swordsman waiting in front of the carriage to feel cold. He felt great power from the cold voice. Previously, he had felt that Ding Ning would have great trouble after joining the sect. Now, it seemed that even joining the sect would not be as simple as he had imagined. Senior Brother Su Qin, the eyes of several youths, including Shen Bai, lit up, looking at their excited and respectful expressions. It seemed that this person's position in their hearts was higher than Zhang Yi's. The person who walked out of the mist was also elegant, with sharp brows and starry eyes. Even if he was thrown onto the busiest street of Chongling, people could recognize him at a glance. If I don't see it with my own eyes, how can I be at ease? If we don't do it ourselves and it spreads outside, they will think that our White Goat Cave has no rules, that anyone can enter as they wish, and that we are a place of evil. They were equally handsome, but this person's eyes and tone were filled with sharpness, like swords that flickered with cold light. This was because the vast majority of battles were decided and commanded by the high-ranking generals. In battle, the soldiers absolutely obeyed orders. Their lives were in the hands of the high-ranking generals. To be able to survive in battle and continuously receive rewards, this showed that the high-ranking generals were wise and outstanding. Naturally, the high-ranking generals also had a share of the merits. Naturally, they had to remember this favor. Nangong Kaishu was someone even his father had to respect. Yet, he scolded her as a thing. If this was our Green Vine Sword Academy, and our principal agreed for someone to enter the academy to study, we would not block the gates to prevent them from entering. As to you saying you cannot see his present abilities, I only want to tell you one thing. A cultivator under Li Lingjuan's command caused me, Su Hashan, and Xie Chongxing to be humiliated. Yet he caused Li Lingjun to be humiliated. You can think of the difference between White Goat Cave and Li Lingjuan's establishment. If he wanted to choose, he would have become an honored guest of Li Lingjuan's establishment. Nangong Kaishu said scornfully, Now he has chosen White Goat Cave, and you disdain him and block him? There was an uproar around the gates. All of the White Goat Cave disciples looked in disbelief at Ding Ning. Li Lingjun was just a hostage, but his rapid rise over the years had caused Li Lingjuan's establishment to become an existence that surpassed ordinary cultivation places. Some of the stories of the common people had clearly not reached White Goat Cave. They did not believe that an ordinary common youth like Ding Ning could cause Li Lingjun to feel humiliated. Amidst the uproar, Su Qin, with his sharp gaze, raised an eyebrow slightly. A cold light flashed across his handsome face. His lips moved as though he wanted to speak. Yet at this time, a calm voice sounded. It is just a simple entry. Why make it so complicated? The front of the gates suddenly became silent. Everyone stared at Ding Ning in a daze. Everyone finally remembered that the true main character of the scene, the object of the dispute, was speaking for the first time. Simple? This was a simple matter. Su Qin's sharp gaze grew colder, and his brow unconsciously furrowed. But Ding Ning still did not give him a chance to speak. From the few scenes of Su Qin's appearance, he could see that Su Qin had more prestige in White Goat Cave than Zhang Yi. He could also see that Su Qin was very eloquent. He was grateful that Nangong Kaishu would speak for him, but he really did not want to waste time here. Since there is a test, let me do it. This way, no one will have any objections. Ding Ning had a calm expression as he looked seriously at the pale Shen Bai, the worried Zhang Yi, and the cold Su Qin. Really? Su Qin raised his eyebrows even more. He finally spat out 2 words. Zhang Yi and Nangong Caishu's expressions changed. But Ding Ning, who did not want to waste time, nodded decisively. Yes. The scene became absolutely silent again. Everyone's eyes were filled with deep confusion and suspicion. They all thought to themselves, was this young man from the streets too frivolous, not knowing that it was extremely difficult to pass the entrance test of all cultivation sects? Or was he really so talented that he had absolute confidence? Come. However, Ding Ning smiled slightly and said, "That's right." Su Qin's breathing inexplicably paused. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then he smiled, showing some white teeth. "All right, let him try." Chapter 33. Multiple White Goat Cave students quickly ran into the valley, looking at the students running happily. Nangong Kaishu grew even more furious. She finally could not help but walk next to the calm Ding Ning. She said with a fierce expression, "Do you know what the White Goat Cave entrance test is?" Ding Ning shook his head and said softly, "I do not know." Nangong Kaishu was speechless, her limbs cold from anger. "I know you are very angry right now. You helped me say all this, but I ruined it with a few words. But do not worry, I should be able to pass," Ding Ning said softly to her with a small smile. "I really do not understand what you are thinking. This kind of test has nothing to do with confidence. Also, you should understand that it is better to have less trouble." Nangong Kaishu took a deep breath and tried to control her emotions. "I think it is better to have less trouble." Ding Ning glanced at Su Qin standing next to the stone stele and said softly, "A matter that allows me to enter or not can allow me to win people's hearts." Nangong Kaishu stilled slightly. Following Ding Ning's gaze, she saw the different expressions of Su Qin and Zhang Yi. One was absolutely cold, and the other was deeply worried. Almost all the White Goat Cave students gathered on the mountain path were clearly leaning towards Su Qin's side, even from where they stood. "So even with you standing up for me, it will still be very troublesome for me to enter the sect." Ding Ning turned to look at her and said softly with a small smile, "However, I do not think that Su Qin will stand higher than Zhang Yi in the future because he was wrong from the start. Those with true power will always stand on the side of those with even more power. Even though Li Lingjun has made such a reputation and won over enough people, returning to the country is still in the hands of the true nobility of the Chu dynasty." Nangong Kaishu frowned. She could not help but turn to look at Ding Ning. "I admit that your words are reasonable, and I admit that you see clearly and far into the future. But the entrance test of all sects is to first test if a person has the possibility of becoming a cultivator. As to knowledge and insight, those are the potential that will be valued after passing the test. Thank you for your concern. But the more you care about me now, the more trouble I will have after I enter the sect." Ding Ning said sincerely in a soft voice, "While White Goat Cave belongs to the Green Vine Sword Academy, I think that the disciples who come here mostly cultivate here. The closer they feel I am to you, the more they will dislike me." Nangong Caishu's brow furrowed even tighter. She could hear Ding Ning's gratefulness and knew that Ding Ning's words were true. But Ding Ning still spoke of matters after he entered the sect. Was he so certain he could pass the entrance test that was impossible to cheat? At this time, more hurried footsteps sounded in the thin mist behind White Goat Cave. The two students running at the front each carefully carried 2 square pine boxes. Behind them were at least 40 to 50 White Goat Cave students. These students had already heard that an ordinary youth from the streets had been exempted from the exam, and were somewhat dissatisfied. However, because their temperaments were not as radical as Shunbai and the others, they had only waited in the valley for the results and did not aggressively block the road like Shunbai and the others. However, now that they had heard that the dispute on the mountain path had already alerted the eldest and second senior brothers, and that this youth from the streets, who had been exempted from the exam, had taken the initiative to ask to enter the mountain, these students could not hold back, and all came out to see what was going on. In reality, for these students who had already entered the sect, the entrance test every year was a show they had to watch. They had to watch, not because there might be a beautiful junior sister, and not because they wanted to see if there were any outstanding people in the sect, but because their sense of superiority was greatly satisfied. Thinking of how they had struggled to pass the test under great mental pressure, and then seeing large numbers of people fail, the joy they felt could not be described with words. But at this time, looking at Ding Ning standing outside the gates, all of the White Goat Cave students felt something was very different. Ding Ning was very calm. It was the kind of absolute calmness, not the kind of calmness that was faked. There was no trace of nervousness in his eyes. Seeing his calmness, Su Qin's sharp gaze grew even colder. Do not think that the entrance test is a game for children. He waved his hand for his junior sect brothers, holding the 2 wooden boxes, to stop at his side. He looked deeply at Ding Ning and said slowly, "Every year, more than 1,000 members of the clans from Chongling and other major cities come here to participate in the entrance test. These people are all outstanding in their places. Otherwise, they would not have come here to embarrass themselves. But of all these people, only a few dozen pass the test. So I hope you can be more serious and careful." Nangong Kaishu took a deep breath, and her face turned ugly again. Su Qin's words sounded like a reminder, but in this situation, they were close to a threat and could easily cause the participants to become nervous. Based on her usual personality, she would not be able to stop herself from saying something. But thinking of Ding Ning's words just now, she managed to stop herself. Zhang Yi's worry grew. He could not help but turn to look at the halls of White Goat Cave behind him. He thought the trouble was growing. Why was no one from Master and Sect Uncle coming out to stop this? But at this time, Ding Ning looked at Su Qin and smiled slightly. "Can we start?" Su Qin's expression did not change, but his dislike of Ding Ning grew. His eyebrows rose slightly, and he said coolly, "Since you are in such a hurry, then let us start immediately." Creak, creak, creak. The wooden box that had been there for a long time opened. The show had started, and everyone grew nervous. Inside one of the wooden boxes was a flat stone plate. Inside the square stone plate, there were labyrinthine spiral grooves. In these spiral grooves, there were at least hundreds of tiny gray stone beads. Because of the slight vibrations, these abnormally smooth gray stone beads rolled like flowing water in the stone plate, forming many gray streams that flowed endlessly. In the other wooden box was a piece of flesh-colored jade carved into a small soldier. The soldier held a sword that was extended straight to its side. While the soldier's face was not carved, this posture of swinging the sword had the aura of a Qin dynasty swordsman, straight, sharp, and unstoppable. This is the flowing stone plate. Because the patterns on the stone plate look like growth rings, and the flow of the stone beads is like water, it is also called the growth ring flowing stone plate. Because the stone plate and stone beads are made of special materials, a slight vibration can cause these stone beads to flow endlessly inside, but the flow speed is not constant. When the 2 wooden boxes were opened, Su Qin reached out and pointed at the stone plate, just like he had done in the past. He said coldly and clearly, "The first obstacle to becoming a cultivator is to calm the mind and meditate." One must first calm the mind and clear the mind. Only then can one enter meditation and sense the energies in one's body. The first thing this stone plate tested was calmness of the heart. Of all these stone beads, 5 are smaller than the others, but this small is only a small difference. So only those with a calm mind can pick them out. For this test, according to the rules of White Goat Cave, you can pick out 5 beads. If you pick 3 correctly, you will pass. Hearing Su Qin's slow narration, many students could not help but think of when they faced this stone plate. Their breathing uncontrollably sped up. The difference between the 5 stone beads and the other stone beads was minuscule. Even if they were placed on a piece of white paper at the same time, they might not be able to distinguish them quickly. In this kind of flowing situation, if they tried again, they might not be 100% confident they could pass. In the past tests they had seen, more than half of the examinees had been eliminated before this stone plate. The wooden box opened to a natural stand. This stone plate was placed on the stand in front of Ding Ning. Ding Ning ignored the strange gazes of the surrounding people. He looked at the stone plate with hesitation in his eyes. In reality, he was a Realm 2 cultivator, and he was not an ordinary cultivator if he could kill a cultivator like Song Shinshu as a Realm 2 cultivator. So what he was hesitating about now was not the flowing stone beads themselves, but the method and result to pass White Goat Cave's entrance test. Because today was his first step in officially appearing in the sight of many people in Chongling. This first step would determine his future status and what method he would use to cultivate in White Goat Cave. He had been low-key and patient in the streets of Chongling for many years. His true cultivation was still very low. Zhang Sun Qianxue had even expressed great dissatisfaction because of this matter. In his and Zhang Sun Qianxue's plan, it would be a long time before he could reach this step. However, more and more flowers bloomed on his wall. There were many people like Song Shinshu who enjoyed a comfortable life. However, there were some who lived like ghosts. There were some who soaked in dirty water every day. I need to be more careful not to let anyone discover the 9-death silkworm. Discover Zhang Sun Qianxue, careful not to die. He took a deep breath and repeated these words in his mind. Then all the hesitation in his eyes disappeared. Among the gasps and gasps of disbelief, he reached out his hand. Only a few dozen breaths had passed from the moment the stone plate was placed in front of him to when he reached out his hand. His hand cut off the thin flow of gray water and took out 5 round gray stone beads. Chapter 34. Nangong Tsaishu's face was filled with shock. The harshness of the entrance test was related to the foundation and level of the sect. Green Vine Sword Academy and White Goat Cave were similar cultivation places, so the difficulty of the entrance test was about the same. The 10,000 thread attraction test at Green Vine Sword Academy was similar to this stone tray, yet even she had used an hour to pass. Just a few dozen breaths. If she could pass, she would break the records of White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword Academy. The other students of White Goat Cave had the same emotions as her. That was why they had exclaimed. Su Qin frowned, a feeling of disbelief surging in his heart. Could it be that this commoner youth really possessed astonishing talent, so he was specially recruited into the academy? Ding Ning looked calmly at him. He did not give this second senior sect brother of White Goat Cave a chance to speak. Then he reached out and opened his palm. Everyone's gaze gathered on his palm. Then even louder gasps and exclamations rang out. Amidst the gasps and exclamations, Zhang Yi's pupils shrank slightly, and the worry between his eyebrows instantly turned into surprise. Nangong Kaishu was completely stunned. Behind Su Qin, Shun Bai, who had been the most vocal in his opposition and had not dared to raise his head after learning of Nangong Tsaishu's identity, turned even paler, and his chest rose and fell violently. 5 stone beads lay silently in Ding Ning's palm. In the thin flow of gray water, these 5 stone beads did not seem any different from the other stone beads. However, at that moment, everyone was able to clearly see that among the 5 stone pearls, one of them was slightly larger, whereas the other 4 were slightly smaller. It was precisely because of the slightly larger stone bead squeezed into his palm that everyone could see that the other 4 were slightly smaller in size. Even if all 5 were not correct, as long as 3 were correct, one would pass the trial of the flowing year ring tray. In the past, White Goat Cave's fastest passing record was 15 minutes. Ding Ning's performance caused everyone to be deeply shocked. At the same time, they even started to suspect that Ding Ning had deliberately taken out the wrong one to make it easier for them to see clearly. Su Qin's expression did not change much, but he was deeply shocked inside. His gaze flickered violently. Then he did not immediately express his thoughts. He reached out with lightning speed and took the 5 stone beads from Ding Ning's hand. His fingertips touched Ding Ning's palm. In this fraction of a breath, Ding Ning clearly felt a weak presence enter from Su Qin's fingertips and quickly travel through his meridians. He knew what Su Qin's intentions were, so he maintained absolute calm as though he did not detect anything. Su Qin's heart sank again, and the chill in his heart became even colder. Shui, Wangshu said hesitantly, could he have cultivated before? There will be no problem. Du Qingxiao shook his head. I have stayed with him for many hours. If even I cannot sense his abnormality, then he is a grandmaster like Zhao Si and Bai Shanshui. Shui Wangshu shook his head. He naturally knew that was impossible. But his body has a great problem. Du Qingxiao glanced at him and said. Shui Wangshu stilled and instinctively asked, what problem? Du Qingxiao said, he has a premature aging body, and his energies are too strong. Shui Wangshu's hands trembled slightly. Then this. He had already made up his mind, but now he had no idea. What does it matter? Du Qingxiao seemed to see through his junior sect brother's thoughts and said with a hint of pride, arrange for him to enter the cave to cultivate with Zhang Yi and Su Qin. Shui Wangshu understood this senior sect brother of his very well, to the point where he could sense the other's thoughts with just a glance. Yet at this time, he did not understand. But his talent is worth White Goat Cave's efforts. As for you, you fear the price spent on him will be wasted? Du Qingxiao smiled coldly and shook his head. Even if it is wasted on him, it is better than following other people's wishes and falling into other people's hands. As to Su Qin, I know you do not like him, and I do not like him, but his talent is not bad. In the past, our master told us that if a person wants to grow faster, there must be people around them to give them pressure. Su Qin is a very good choice. Shui Wangshu pondered for a moment and nodded. He looked at Du Qingxiao seriously, and his eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion. Senior brother, although my cultivation base has been suppressing yours all these years, there are times when your sharpness is something I can't reach. But what is the use? In the end, I still cannot protect White Goat Cave. Du Qingxiao smiled self-deprecatingly. The pride in his eyes disappeared, and he was filled with emotion. I am going to leave. I will trouble you. But very good, you are more tolerant than me. If you can tolerate and not fight, you can go further. White Goat Cave is gone. It is good to leave some seeds. Shui Wangshu looked at Du Qingxiao's eyes. He thought of the storms he and this senior sect brother had experienced in White Goat Cave and of his impending departure. For a moment, he was speechless. His fate isn't good. However, for him to meet us at this time, it can be considered fate. If there's anything he can give, then give it to him. It's better than letting that woman take advantage of him. Du Qingxiao turned his head, no longer looking at him. His gaze landed on the distant mountain gate. in front of the mountain gates. It was deathly silent. Even Su Qin's face was slightly pale. He and Zhang Yi were the best students of White Goat Cave in decades. Yet even when they entered the sect, they had spent 15 minutes to sense the energy of this jade soldier. Also, this jade soldier was unique to White Goat Cave, and the outside world could not target it. Yet in front of him and everyone else, Ding Ning was like a miracle. In just a dozen breaths, he could clearly sense the energy within, causing the sword in the terracotta soldier's hand to shine. Senior sect brothers and sisters, can you take me in to greet the teachers? While everyone was shocked, Ding Ning smiled calmly. He clasped his hands and bowed to Su Qin, Zhang Yi, and the others as he said softly. Zhang Yi also smiled. He bowed back and said gently and seriously, "Junior sect brother, please." Li Daoji turned around as though he had come out just to remind Zhang. Yet the moment he turned and started to walk, he said coldly, "The cave master has orders for Ding Ning to enter the library cave to study." A series of heavy gasps could be heard. These words caused all the White Goat Cave students around the gates to sink into incomprehensible shock. Yet Li Daoji seemed to feel this shock was not enough. He added, "No restrictions." In this moment, the gates were deathly silent. Other than a few secret arts passed down orally, the library cave of White Goat Cave contained all the scriptures of White Goat Cave, including the understandings of many generations of White Goat Cave cultivators on their own cultivation paths. Even the disciples of the sect would only be able to enter the library for the first time after half a year of study. The library cave was also divided into the inner and outer parts. The mantras and records in the outer cave were easier to understand. Moreover, there were no special restrictions when practicing them. Therefore, any disciple could read and study them. However, the books in the inner cave were more profound. In particular, the experiences and insights of many powerful seniors were not necessarily 100% correct. They needed to be screened by the disciples themselves. Therefore, only disciples who met certain requirements in certain aspects and had contributed to the sect to a certain extent were allowed to enter. Why? A loud cry filled with many emotions broke the silence. The one who spoke was Shenbai. He felt that this was too unfair. Even he had never obtained the qualifications to study in the library cave. So even though he might face the harsh punishment of sect Uncle Li Daoji, he could not endure it. Yet, Li Daoji did not even turn his head. He said coolly, "Just a special case." Shunbai was stunned. He could not speak. The White Goat Cave students around him felt their hearts numb from the repeated shocks. But when they heard Li Daoji's words, they felt it was reasonable. Because of Ding Ning's previous performance, they believed that Ding Ning could enter White Goat Cave as an exception, not because of some shady transaction, but because the cave master had found Ding Ning's unique talent. Since he had not entered the sect during the exam, then what was the problem in making an exception to let him enter the library to cultivate? Looking at Li Daoji's back, Ding Ning's eyes flashed with an unusual expression. Empress. He once again thought of this title that seemed distant due to the great difference in status. Then he thought of that white-haired old man with a sword like a white goat horn. To be able to offend the Empress, and these accidents, it seemed that this White Goat Cave was not as ordinary as most people thought. Special envoy. Ding Ning followed Zhang Yi over the stone steel. After the dust settled, no one spoke to stop them. The gray-robed swordsman's eyes were still filled with shock. He drove the carriage away and decided to tell everything that had happened here to Wang Taishu. Zhang Yi was very attentive. Because it was just past lunchtime, he had people prepare some rice balls and sent them to Ding Ning, Nangong Kaishu, and the others after they passed through the gates. Eating and drinking is forbidden in the library cave. When it is time to eat, someone will send food boxes outside the library cave, according to the cave master's orders. Each batch of Green Vine Sword Academy can only study for 1 day. As to junior sect brother Ding Ning, the cave master did not say, and sect uncle Li Daoji did not say clearly, so I think there is no time limit. You can stay until you want to come out and rest. I will arrange your residence for you. You don't have to worry about anything. As for the cultivation curriculum, your time of entry into the sect is different from the other disciples. Furthermore, the cave master has said that there will be special treatment. When the time comes, I will have to seek the cave master's opinion. Zhang Yi led the way as he introduced. Ding Ning carefully nibbled on the rice balls mixed with wild vegetables and some unknown beast meat as he examined the true appearance of this cultivation place. In the Qin dynasty, the top sects were naturally Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. These two sects had thousands of inner sect disciples and tens of thousands of outer sect disciples. The thousands of inner sect disciples they had accumulated over the past decades were the best from all over the Qin dynasty and even the subordinate countries. These two sects were naturally high up, and the other sects could not compare to them. Other than these two sects, there were more than a dozen top sects in the Qin dynasty. Among them, Hung Mountain Sword School and other sects prospered because of the support of outstanding marquises and generals. The others, such as Black Ruins, Sword Cave, and Genie Academy, had deep foundations. White Goat Cave could only recruit a few dozen students with cultivation talent each year. Of all the students who came out, there were only a few who could reach Realm 4 first class. White Goat Cave did not even have the chance to participate in the Min Mountain Sword Trials. This meant that before White Goat Cave merged into Green Vine Sword Academy, it had been a third-class sect and could not even compare to some of the outer sect cultivation places of Min Mountain Sword Sect. However, the cultivation places of some eras would always have unique sceneries. When they truly entered the gates of White Goat Cave, Ding Ning finally saw that all of White Goat Cave's halls were supported by pillars and built on the steep rocks on the two sides of the valley. Almost all of the stone steps were artificially carved from the cliffs, and some of the palaces were connected by rope bridges. Most of the palaces were just like a door, and inside were caves. There were no signs of man-made carvings between the trees and river valleys at the bottom of the valley. There were no buildings, and they remained the same. Clearly, the earliest group of cultivators of White Goat Cave had lived in the caves on the two sides of the valley. Our cultivation places and residences are in the caves on the two sides of the cliffs. The caves are warm in winter and cool in summer. Also, the caves of White Goat Gorge have a kind of ash stone that will naturally absorb moisture, so the caves are not as humid as other places. However, the mountain winds are very strong. Junior sect brother, you are thin and not familiar with the roads. If you walk alone, you have to be careful. Also, the places where the stone steps reach are places where the sect disciples can go. As to the places where the rope bridges reach, they require special permission to enter. Zhang Yi introduced in detail and mentioned the caves of White Goat Cave. Hearing this, Ding Ning suddenly interrupted and asked, "Senior sect brother, since it is a special case, can I return to Falling Parasol at night? My aunt is the only one in Falling Parasol's wine shop, and it is rather quiet. Also, I can go back and help with some things." Zhang Yi stilled and then answered, "If it is someone else, it will not be possible, but junior sect brother, I have to have someone ask sect Uncle Daoji or Cave Master." Chapter 36. White Goat Cave was not large. The small temple that looked like a lone island under the white clouds was less than 1,000 feet tall. Zhang Yi stopped as he walked and listed the uses of White Goat Cave's buildings. He spoke of some of White Goat Cave's rules. In less than 15 minutes, the extremely important library cave appeared in front of Ding Ning. Outside the library cave was a small, crude stone hall that was carved out of the mountain. The only way in and out was a rope bridge that swayed slightly in the wind. The wooden planks of the bridge were slightly black and gave people a feeling that it was not very sturdy. The sect uncle of White Goat Cave's disciplinary sword, Li Daoji, who had caused a chill on the mountain path, was standing at the entrance to the bridge. Zhang Yi cautiously went forward, bowed, and asked softly. Li Daoji nodded. Then his cold and authoritative gaze landed on Dingning. Cultivation is about being out of the world, being quiet and less disturbed. You spend all your energy on your body and the primal energies of the universe to progress quickly. So all cultivation sects are naturally isolated from the outside world. However, there was also the saying of entering the mortal world for cultivation. Some people who cultivated in the mortal world would have more insights and more opportunities, and their cultivation progress would be faster. Moreover, no matter how powerful a cultivator was, he was still a human. He could not escape the deception and deception of others. If he entered the mortal world, he would not be like a goldfish raised in a clear pond. Once he entered the mortal world, he would not be used to it. The cave master said that you are a special case, but in the end, it depends on your cultivation progress and whether you qualify. He looked at Dingning and said slowly. Dingning looked at his cold eyes and said, "Sect uncle means that I can return to Falling Parasol, but I first have to prove that my cultivation progress is fast enough." Li Daoji frowned slightly. He didn't know how much this wine shop youth had understood from his words, but he still nodded and said, "Clearly, you can choose and study the records in the library cave. The cave master will arrange and adjust your living and cultivation based on your performance in the coming days." Hearing Li Daoji's words, Dingning did not have any special reaction. But Zhang Yi in front of him, Nangong Kaishu, and the other disciples behind him were shocked and puzzled, while cultivators all used vital energy to move the energy of their natural enemies. And the theory was the same in vital energy cultivation. Because each cultivator had different physiques and different energies, the vital energy cultivation methods left behind by countless generations of cultivators were very different. The vital energy formed would also have different characteristics. An extreme example was the true fire palace of the Yen dynasty. Only the direct disciples qualified to cultivate the demon fire art. The primal energies of the universe gathered by vital energy could only form terrifying true fire. The only female bureau chief of the Qin dynasty, Yi Siling, cultivated the Li water divine art of Tianyi Sword Pavilion, which manifested as all kinds of water flows. Different methods, sword moves, and other methods to move primal energies of the universe against enemies had different power and effects. Usually, after a disciple entered the sect would teach according to their abilities. They would give some suggestions based on the disciple's potential and characteristics and help him choose suitable methods and sword moves to cultivate. Choosing a cultivation method was the first step to crossing the river in the dark. It would decide a cultivator's life. Yet now, White Goat Cave made an exception and did not give any suggestions and allowed Dingning to choose freely. Even after Li Daoji left and disappeared from everyone's sight, Zhang Yi still could not believe this was true. But he would not go against the decision of the cave master. He respected to the extreme. So after he passed through the rope bridge and led Dingning, Nangong Kaishu, and the others into the stone hall outside the library cave, he couldn't help but warn Dingning with a bitter expression. "Junior sect brother, there are many vital energy methods in the library. Many of them are powerful and have their own characteristics. But you have to see if they have any weaknesses and if they are suitable for you. So you have to consider carefully." The stone door of the library cave slowly opened and revealed a stone staircase that slowly led upwards. When you started the growth ring stone disc test, you took out one of the 5 stone beads incorrectly. Did you do it on purpose? From the entrance to the library cave, Nangong Kaishu had purposefully maintained a distance from Ding Ning. As she and Ding Ning started to enter the cave, Nangong Kaishu finally could not help but walk up to Ding Ning and ask seriously. Ding Ning had not expected her to be thinking about this. He turned and saw her curious and serious gaze. He couldn't help but smile slightly. You did it on purpose so that everyone would have a comparison and be able to distinguish right away, right? Nangong Kaishu saw something from his smile, and her heart shook. If I could quickly take out 4, of course I could get all 5 right. Ding Ning glanced at her and said softly, I just did not want to spend too much time. From the start, you knew you could pass the entrance test. Hearing his words, Nangong Kaishu's brow furrowed deeply. She looked suspiciously at Ding Ning. This matter is too strange. Even if you know you are a genius, you should not have such absolute confidence. Also, the cave master of White Goat Cave gave you such an exception, and did not give you any suggestions when you entered the library cave to choose cultivation records to be able to pass the growth ring stone disc and the jade soldier test so quickly, unless you have practiced countless times with them. You are not the illegitimate child of the cave master of White Goat Cave, right? Ding Ning had been listening with interest, but when he heard her last conjecture, he almost fell on the stone steps. Miss Nangong, your imagination is too rich. He looked at Nangong Kaishu, whose eyes were filled with suspicion, and said helplessly, a person with such rich imagination like you should go to the astrology bureau to investigate in the future. Did you really just rely on absolute talent? Nangong Kaishu's eyes were still filled with disbelief. As she thought, she said, but since you are certain you have such talent, why did you not participate in the spring test of each sect? Everyone in Chongling should know that other than sects like Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate, most other sects do not have any prerequisites. Anyone of the right age can participate. Also, with your performance today, if you did not cheat, you can enter a better sect. Ding Ning's heart sank slightly. This was a flaw that could cause suspicion. In the future, people would have such suspicions. He had to give a reasonable explanation. He frowned slightly, thought, and said, cultivation is not something everyone can think about. At the start, I did not know I had the potential to become a cultivator until Fang Xiumu came to see me, until I met Wang Taishu. Fang Xiumu? Fang, Ho Province's Fang Xiumu. Nangong Kaishu was shocked. Fang Qilin, one of the 13 marquises of the Qin dynasty, was old. Yet in these years, Fang Ho Province showed no signs of decline and seemed to surpass the other marquis establishments. This was because Fang Qilin had 2 enviable sons. One of the sons, Fang Xiang, was like Nangong Kaishu's father, a powerful general who guarded the outer vassal cities. The other son, Fang Xiumu, was famed for being a sword maniac. He had no interest in anything other than cultivation. While the outside world did not know what level Fang Xiumu's cultivation had reached, at least a decade ago, many of the true nobility of Chongling were certain that Fang Xiumu was the fastest to break through among all the people of similar age in Chongling. Based on his cultivation speed, even the 2 ministers and the Yuanwu Emperor had concluded that he was the cultivator with the highest chance of reaching Realm 7 first class among the young cultivators of Chongling. Above the 7th realm was the 8th realm. It was a realm that very few cultivators had reached since ancient times. A person who could receive such praise from the 2 ministers, and the Holy One was a legend for Nangong Kaishu. Who is Wang Taishu? This was a true essence cultivation method that he had heard of but had never seen before. Flipping open the cover made from thick butter paper, his thoughts were immersed in this book whose pages had turned yellow. The contents were the same as what he had heard. This true essence cultivation method was very suitable for his present state. This true essence cultivation method required abundant energies. The natural state of his body meant that he could simplify the energy cultivation process. His cultivation speed would be much faster than ordinary methods. Also, the vital energy and true essence produced by this method was very beneficial to his dual cultivation with Zhongsun Qianxue. He read for a moment, put away the book, held it in his arms, and then continued forward. 5-yang righteous body was also beneficial to his dual cultivation with Zhongsun Qianxue. While it was not as fast as the Red Phoenix Godly Radiating Sutra, his flesh and blood would be stronger. This method was not bad. Still light flow method, a cultivation method that could make the flow of vital energy faster. This way, the speed of going from energy refinement realm to vital energy realm would be much faster than ordinary methods. Ding Ning was completely immersed in it and unconsciously held 3 books in his arms. Sitting Diluted Heart Sutra. Suddenly, these 4 words fell into his eyes. His body trembled slightly, and his face instantly stiffened. His gaze held a hint of disbelief as he quickly moved forward. Heavenly reflection, spirit shedding method, fate reversal method. He quickly caught these words on the bookshelf in front of him. He took a deep breath and felt a strange itch in his body. Just these familiar words allowed him to understand why White Goat Cave had offended the Empress and was forced to merge with the Green Vine Sword Academy. These were books that should not have existed in the Qin dynasty. In the first year of Yuanwu, in order to stabilize the throne he had just taken and to eliminate the traces of that person's existence, countless cultivators were killed. Many sects were convicted of rebellion. After those sects were destroyed, in order to express their loyalty to the Holy One and the Empress, and to prevent the Holy One and the Empress from worrying about those sects rising from the ashes, countless books related to those sects were burned to the ground. In fact, as time passed, many things of the past became stories. Even if there were some records left behind by those sects, the present cultivators would have a hard time connecting themselves to those sects and wanting to do something for those sections. Yet this represented a kind of attitude the Holy One and the Empress did not want any possibility. The fact that there were books in White Goat Cave's History Cave that should have been destroyed meant the attitude of some cultivators of White Goat Cave. Even if they simply felt that cultivation methods were not sinful for the cultivators of the world, any comprehension on the path of cultivation was a rare experience. But many people in Chongling felt that they had a thread of sympathy for those sects and had a different view of some of the events of the past. Ding Ning was filled with an indescribable feeling. He looked deeply at those books that were likely the only ones in Chongling. His slightly stiff fingers did not touch them and continued to slide forward on the bookshelf. His emotions gradually calmed down. Explanation of the Spirit Source Way. A thin, ancient book inexplicably attracted his gaze. In his memories, this was a cultivation method that came from the Spirit Source True Treasure sect of the Zhao. It was extremely ordinary and circulated among the people of each dynasty. This ancient book was clearly not valued by anyone in White Goat Cave. The old cover was damaged, and no one had repaired it. From the marks where the book touched the bookshelf, this ancient book had not been touched for many years. But through the damaged cover, Ding Ning saw that some of the movement diagrams inside did not seem so ordinary. He couldn't help but frown slightly. He carefully took out the ancient book and slowly opened it. His brows immediately furrowed even deeper, and his eyes began to flicker with an abnormal light. The description at the beginning was not much different from the explanation of the Spirit Source Way, but the first movement diagram was not simple. The more he flipped, the more shocked Ding Ning was. He was certain that this was not an ordinary explanation of the Spirit Source Way, but an extraordinary cultivation method that had been mistaken for an ordinary explanation of the spirit source way. Flipping through a few more pages, he saw a few profound and cryptic words next to a movement diagram that most cultivators could not understand. Immersed in it, Ding Ning almost cursed. This was not an ordinary method passed down by an ordinary sect before the Zhao dynasty. This was clearly the secret method of the Selfless Palace, one of the 3 great cultivation places of the Han dynasty, the killing 3 corpses selfless origin scripture. For ordinary cultivators, the 3 corpses referred to the 3 evil desires of a person: selfish desire, appetite, and lust. These 3 desires were detrimental to cultivation and had to be suppressed. Only the Selfless Palace's killing 3 corpses selfless origin scripture had to stimulate these 3 desires in the process of cultivation, and then at some crucial stages of cultivation, forcefully cut off these desires. In the process of stimulating these 3 desires, the cultivator's 5 energies would be more exuberant than ordinary cultivators. Once they were cut off, if they succeeded, their mental power and state of mind would be greatly improved. This was a dangerous technique that would allow one to survive in the face of death. At the same time, it was also a powerful technique that surpassed ordinary cultivation techniques. Decades before it was destroyed by the Qin dynasty, the Han dynasty, and the neighboring Wei dynasty had fought continuously. The Selfless Palace was destroyed in a great defeat of the Han dynasty. According to legends, the Selfless Palace occupied thousands of hectares. After it was destroyed, the flames that burned the Selfless Palace did not extinguish completely for a month. In the battle back then, the treasures and records of the Selfless Palace were stolen by the defeated armies of the Han dynasty and the Wei dynasty. Many of the surviving cultivators of the Selfless Palace stole some things and fled, or destroyed them to prevent useful records from falling into the hands of the Wei army. Countless remnant pages of records danced in the flames like butterflies. Ding Ning did not know how this killing 3 corpses selfless origin scripture, disguised as an ordinary method, had ended up in the library cave of White Goat Cave, but he was certain that this method was extremely powerful, and he would be able to cultivate it quickly. At the same time, he was certain that even the inner cave of White Goat Cave that he had never entered before could not have a method stronger than this. So he put down the 3 records in his bosom, and only took this one. Then he stopped looking at vital energy cultivation methods, and focused on choosing movement and sword scriptures that were compatible with him. As time passed, he entered the inner cave. The inner cave was only 1/3 the size of the outer cave, but the records inside were more profound and detailed than the ones outside. In the end, his finger landed on a sword manual with a very ordinary name. This sword manual with a black cover was called the Wildfire Sword Manual. Then he lost interest in the records here and walked towards the several meditation mats at the side. Don't tell me that you've only chosen these 2 ancient books after choosing so many. You want to cultivate these 2 records? 2 incredulous voices sounded in the silent cave and reached Ding Ning's ears. Chapter 38. Ding Ning turned around. He saw Nangong Kaishu standing behind him with an expression of disbelief. Did you really choose these 2 records and prepare to cultivate them? Looking at Ding Ning's expression, Nangong Kaishu could not help but ask again. Ding Ning nodded and said, "Yes." "How much do you know about cultivation, or rather, do you even understand what cultivation is?" Hearing Ding Ning admit that he really had such plans, Nangong Kaishu was so angry her lips trembled. Ding Ning looked at this pale young girl and said calmly, "Is there a problem? Do you know what kind of ancient books these are?" Nangong Kaishu's angry gaze landed on the 2 records in Ding Ning's hands. Her eyelashes trembled. "Do you know that the spirit source way truth is just a shallow, vital energy cultivation method? There is nothing special about it. Also, This vital energy cultivation method comes from the Zhao. As a Qin person, if you cultivate this method, you will not obtain any special benefits and will attract the displeasure of many important people. As to this wildfire sword, it is not powerful, but is extremely complex and difficult to cultivate. The sword forms are hard to learn, and the combination of vital energy and vital energy is extremely complicated. Our Green Vine Sword Academy also has this sword method, but none of my senior sect brothers and sisters have ever chosen to cultivate this sword method. You mean the combination of the method I chose and this sword method is very poor? Ding Ning smiled slightly and said. Seeing Ding Ning still able to smile, Nangong Saishu's face grew cold. Not very poor. It cannot be worse. Since you are different from us, and there is no time limit to studying here, why can't you spend more time and carefully read the contents of each record? You should know that not all White Goat Cave disciples have the chance to enter the inner cave to choose records from the start. Your starting point is higher than theirs. Why do you not treasure it? Ding Ning looked seriously at her and said softly, But what does my choice have to do with you? Nangong Kaishu stilled. This did not seem to have anything to do with her. She had followed him to see what kind of ancient books he was going to choose out of curiosity. Now, she was angry because she wanted to see a wonderful show. In the end, she saw a clumsy performance that did not match the show and was too disappointed. But what did this have to do with her? She and Ding Ning had only met once before today and could not even be considered friends. How I cultivate is my own matter, but I know you are doing this for my own good, so I am really grateful to you. Ding Ning looked at her and said, Also, different records are different for different people. I am certain these 2 records are suitable for me. If other people had said this to Nangong Kaishu before they started to cultivate, Nangong Kaishu would have felt that this person was either ignorant or an idiot. But thinking of Ding Ning's confidence and performance outside the gates, and seeing Ding Ning's calm and confident gaze, Nangong Kaishu asked dazedly, You are certain? I am certain. Ding Ning nodded and said sincerely and seriously, Also, quickly search for the things you need. You have wasted a lot of precious time following me. Nangong Kaishu still felt this was absurd, but Ding Ning's previous words had some effect. Regardless of how absurd Ding Ning's confidence looked, nothing was more important than her cultivation right now. She didn't say anything more. She took a deep breath and tried her best to calm herself down. Then she began to flip through the ancient books in the inner cave. The other students of the Green Vine Sword Academy were immersed in the knowledge and experience of cultivation. The library cave became unusually quiet again, with only the rustling of pages. Beams of bright light fell on Ding Ning's body and the ancient booklet that was spread open on the futon in front of him. He quickly forgot about the world around him and threw himself into a new cultivation. Today, White Goat Cave had given him many surprises. This book had been disguised as an ordinary cultivation method, but in reality, it was a great treasure for the top sections. For him, this was a rare surprise, an opportunity. Even he wanted to know what kind of different wonders this cultivation method would have. The notes and pictures on the pages of the book appeared clearly in his mind as he slowly thought about it. Then they slowly connected and became clear and real. He slowly closed his eyes. The first step of cultivation was to look inside with one's mind and feel the energies in the body. For ordinary people, it would take an unknown amount of time to reach this first step and feel the existence of the energies in the body. Yet the moment he closed his eyes, he had completed the first step. Driven by his psyche power, the 5 Qis in his body began to follow the path of this cultivation method. They slowly moved through his body and moved towards his sea of Qi. Different cultivation methods were like the seal lines on different seals. Different paths of the 5 energies in the body would transform differently in the body and produce different vital energy and vital energy in the future. This principle was not complicated. Any vital energy cultivation method was a mental power exploration of the body. It was the transformation of the energies in the body and the primal energies of the universe. However, this brand new process and mysterious transformation was filled with countless unknown dangers. Time silently passed. Night started to cover White Goat Gorge. A White Goat Cave student delivering food was close to the rope bridge leading to the library cave. Nangong Kaishu and several outstanding students of the Green Vine Sword Academy were completely engrossed and forgot the time. Even their movements of flipping the pages slowed. Suddenly, Nangong Kaishu and the Green Vine Sword Academy students felt a breeze. This breeze was very weak, but the air in the library cave seemed to have solidified. So for cultivators like them, this breeze was an abnormal change and worthy of being wary. Nangong Kaishu instinctively looked up. Because of her body's natural nervousness, her breathing paused slightly. She found that this breeze came from Ding Ning's body. Ding Ning's body seemed to have a wave charging into an empty place and forcing out some of the presence of that empty place. This was the source of the wind. She was dazed, but in the next moment, she saw that under Ding Ning's skin, there seemed to be a light that had not been there before. There seemed to be a 5-colored jade light flashing. She started to think of when she first started to cultivate. She thought of when her senior and junior sect brothers had their breakthroughs, opened their energy seas, and officially became Realm 1/3 class cultivators. This was inner perception, comprehending the 5 energies and opening the energy sea. These words finally appeared in her mind. Then her body was taken over by an unprecedented shock. She started to tremble uncontrollably. The other Green Vine Sword Academy students started to realize what had happened. Their bodies started to tremble violently. They looked worse than Nangong Kaishu. Their faces were snowy white. They opened their mouths but could not make a sound or breathe like fish dying of thirst. How long had it taken them to open their energy seas, step into Realm 1/3 class of profound understanding, and become true cultivators? Even the fastest among them had taken a full 7 months to do so, but from choosing cultivation manuals to starting to comprehend to opening the energy sea, this wine shop youth from Falling Parasol had only used half a day. Profound understanding in half a day. The White Goat Cave student who came to deliver food to the library cave was Yi Ming, who had been responsible for welcoming Ding Ning at the start of the day. He carried the food box. Before he stepped into the stone hall outside the library cave, he saw Li Daoji walk out of the stone hall with a pale face. He didn't even look at him and floated past him. Yiming found it strange. He didn't know what happened to sect Uncle Li Daoji. While he was just as silent, he did not seem as authoritative and cold as usual. Li Daoji walked quickly across the rope bridge with his head bowed. His body flashed in the night, passed through several white clouds, and landed on the platform outside the small temple at the highest point. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice that youth has already chosen a cultivation manual and sword manual. Shui Wangshu, who had been sitting in the cave as though he had fallen asleep, immediately opened his eyes. His eyes were as bright as stars. What did he choose? Li Daoji said, "True explanation of the Spirit Source Way Wildfire Sword Manual." Shui Wangshu stilled and instinctively reached to touch the teapot on the stone table. He murmured, "This is not good. It does not match. No wonder your voice is trembling in anger." Li Daoji slowly raised his head and used great effort to say, "Not from anger, because he has reached profound understanding. He just entered Realm 1 and opened his energy sea." "What did you say?" Shui Wangshu's hand shook and almost broke the teapot in his hand. Li Daoji took a deep breath, looked at him, and repeated seriously, "He reached profound understanding in half a day." Although this was the truth, when it fell into her ears at this moment, it was perhaps too arrogant and pretentious. Looking at him frowning, Nangong Kaishu started to wake up. "Are you a true monster like the people of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate?" She took a deep breath and withdrew her trembling finger. With a complex expression, she said, "Did you choose a cultivation technique like the Spirit Source Tao Quintessence because it's the easiest for you to understand, and it's the easiest for you to break through your cultivation base?" Ding Ning smiled apologetically. He felt that he could not explain these things to her. Also, the cultivation of any cultivator was a tightly guarded secret. But when Nangong Kaishu saw his apologetic smile, she thought that he was apologetic because his talent was far greater than theirs. In her heart, she also found an explanation for why Ding Ning chose such an ordinary cultivation method, like the true explanation of the way of spiritual source. Because of Ding Ning's physical problems, and because his lifespan was not as long as other people, he had to choose a method that was relatively simple and could progress faster. "It seems that you are a true monster." She was slightly sad and lowered her head dejectedly. "It seems that I should not have doubted your abilities from the start. I should not have meddled in other people's business." Among the pale-faced green vine sword school students behind Nangong Kaishu, the most composed youth's eyes flashed, and he could not help but move. "Lu Maolong, if you want to gain some good feelings from this person, I advise you not to go forward." However, at this moment, the shortest youth beside him, whose black hair was draped over his shoulders, said softly in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "It's already too late to express some friendliness now." Hearing these words, the young man named Lu Maolong immediately froze, his heart filled with regret. He knew that the other party's words were correct. This wine shop youth was young, but he seemed to have calm eyes that could see through everything. Outside the sect, when Nangong Kaishu had stood up for him, they had not thought much of this youth. Now, because of the terrifying talent the other showed, if they tried to make friends, they would not be able to gain any friendship from the other. To them, some courteous words on the surface were completely meaningless. It was better not to embarrass themselves. Multiple Green Vine Sword Academy students started to search for the cultivation knowledge and experience they wanted. In order to throw away their shock, disappointment, and regret, they purposely moved further away from Nangong Kaishu and Ding Ning. Ding Ning felt very hungry. He could even smell the fragrance of food outside the library cave. He stilled and then smelled the natural and faint virgin fragrance of Nangong Kaishu. A hint of shock rose in his mind. He immediately reacted. This should be another change brought about by the Kill 3 Corpses Selfless Self-Essence Sutra. This was a top-class cultivation method from the Han Dynasty. When he had just reached the profound understanding stage, it had already made him much more sensitive to smell and smell. He did not reject this change in perception. He took a deep breath and prepared to stand and walk out of the library cave to eat. For him, today's cultivation had ended. If White Goat Cave did not have special arrangements, he would choose the wine shop in Falling Parasol. But at this time, he noticed the open book in Nangong Kaishu's hand. He hesitated slightly and looked at Nangong Kaishu, who had her head bowed. He said softly, "What major problems do you have in your cultivation?" Nangong Kaishu, who was still emotionally unstable, shook slightly. She looked up and looked into Ding Ning's eyes. She said suspiciously, "You want to help me? Everyone's cultivation is different." Ding Ning looked at her and said seriously, "At most, I will discuss with you. As to whether it will be useful to you, that is unknown. It is fine, even if you cannot help me." Sensing Ding Ning's true kindness, Nangong Kaishu was inexplicably happy. Young girls of her age usually had the best idea of friendship. Her disappointment just now was likely not due to the difference in talent between her and Ding Ning, but because Ding Ning had maintained a respectful attitude towards her good intentions. There is a problem with my comprehension. Thinking that the other was a true monster who had reached profound understanding in half a day, and had even chosen his own method, she grew more excited and quickly added, "There is a problem with your comprehension of primal energies of the universe." Ding Ning looked at her shining eyes and asked seriously. "Yes." Nangong Kaishu nodded seriously. "My cultivation has reached Realm 2 first-class marrow transformation. At this realm, I can try to sense primal energies of the universe. I have done so because the key to breaking through from Realm 2 energy, refinement realm to Realm 3 vital energy realm is to find primal energies of the universe that can merge with one's own physical energy. Drawing primal energies of the universe into one's body is the key. As long as one can draw some primal energies of the universe into one's body, there will be no problems with the merging of one's physical energy and primal energies of the universe." Ding Ning looked at the open records in front of her. "You cannot sense the existence of primal energies of the universe at all, or are you unable to sense the difference between primal energies of the universe because it is a ball of chaos?" Nangong Kaishu shook her head and said softly, "If that is the case, my teacher and I will not be in such a hurry. I can sense the existence of primal energies of the universe, and I can even sense that each strand of primal energies of the universe is different. But in my perception, each strand of primal energies of the universe is resistant to me, as though each strand of primal energies is not close to me. Maybe it is because of my constitution. When my father cultivated, he had the same problem as me. He was stuck from Realm 2 to Realm 3 for 7 years." After a pause, Nangong Kaishu said worriedly, "Because of this concern, he did not have me cultivate the 10,000 wave true water art he is skilled in, and had me cultivate the Green Vine Sword Academy's greenwood art. But now, I have encountered the same problem as him. I broke through from Realm 1 to Realm 2 first class. I am the fastest student of the Green Vine Sword Academy. But if I am stuck at this level for 7 years, I may be slower than most people." Ding Ning nodded. He reached out and closed the book in front of Nangong Kaishu. "Minute Differentiation of Primal Energies." He softly read the name of this book. Then he frowned and asked seriously, "So you came to the White Goat Cave Library Cave to see if the books and notes here can give you some inspiration?" Nangong Kaishu nodded. "My father did not have any special comprehension of his breakthrough. He just felt the primal energies of the universe enter his body during a dangerous battle. If I cannot find the reason, maybe what awaits me will be a more tragic experience than the past 7 years. If one was stuck in Realm 2 for 7 years, it would be very tragic, especially when one saw the people around them surpass them and leave them far behind. They may feel despair." Ding Ning thought carefully. These 2 notebooks seem to contain a lot of unique insights. Why don't you take a closer look? He quickly stood up and flipped through more than a dozen books. In the end, he picked 2 books and placed them in front of Nangong Kaishu. He said seriously, "Take your time. I will go out and eat something. Then I may return home." Notes of the Master of the Banana Pond on Ba Mountain. Theory of Opening the Heavens. Nangong Kaishu looked in shock at these 2 books of seemingly casual notes and flipped them open. Chapter 40. Ding Ning slowly walked out of the library cave, opened the food box placed at the door of the stone hall, and took out his portion. Then he sat on the stone bench at the entrance of the hall, slowly eating the still warm vegetables, and began to sort out today's harvest in his mind. The 3 Corpses Non-Self Origin Sutra, disguised as an ordinary cultivation method, was definitely a very overbearing cultivation method. Not only could it allow one to have a better perception than ordinary cultivation methods, but the Zhen Yuan cultivated in the future would definitely be very violent. If the true essence cultivated from an ordinary cultivation method was like a huge wave in a river, then the true essence of this cultivation method should be like a huge wave that contained a beast that was difficult to control. As to the Wildfire Sword Manual, it was a sword manual that the cultivators of Chongling had seriously underestimated in these years. The true meaning of this sword manual was not the wildfire burning the plains, but that the wildfire could not burn and would grow again when the spring wind blew. Because the sword moves were too complex, very few people cultivated this sword manual. This caused even fewer people to discover the true sword essence of this sword manual. But for Ding Ning, complexity was not a problem. This was the first step of starting over. He was very lucky and walked well. An unusual night wind blew over and messed up his hair. He raised his head and saw the cold-faced Li Daoji jump down from somewhere, causing the cable bridge to sway. "Follow me." It was so simple that before Ding Ning could say anything, Li Daoji turned around and motioned for Ding Ning to follow. Sect Uncle Li Daoji. Ding Ning looked with a grimace at the half-eaten food. "I have not finished eating." "Some matters are far more important than eating." Li Daoji's sword hilt flashed with faint red light in the night like a lantern in front of him. His footsteps did not stop at all, and only his cold voice floated through the night mist. Ding Ning shook his head, helplessly grabbed a rice ball, and quickly followed. The shining sword hilt swayed in the night and moved upwards. In the night mist, there was a narrow rope bridge that had not been there during the day. It stretched towards a crack in the cliff not far from the tallest Taoist temple. Strangely, there was a flat piece of land between the mountain crevices that were usually covered by white clouds. On the flat ground, there were even 3 identical straw huts. In front of the thatched hut, there were even a few vegetable fields on the flat ground. They were all planted with some leeks. "This room will be your residence from now on," Li Daoji sensed that Ding Ning had also passed through the narrow bridge and stepped onto the ground. He had walked to the front of the 3 huts and turned his body slightly. He pointed at the leftmost hut and spoke to Ding Ning. "You can also cultivate here on normal days. You don't have to listen to lectures like the other students. If you have any questions in the process of cultivation, you can directly ask me or Zhang Yi. However, your meals will not be delivered here. They will only be delivered to the stone hall in the scripture cave." After thinking about it, Li Daoji added another sentence. He did not have to listen to lectures like the other students, and could directly find Li Daoji. If other students heard this, they would be shocked and envious. This was equivalent to directly receiving Li Daoji's teachings. Right now, Li Daoji was the publicly acknowledged top expert of White Goat Cave other than the cave master, who had not shown his cultivation for many years. Hearing Li Daoji's words, Ding Ning did not have any expression of joy. He said softly and seriously, "Sect Uncle Li Daoji, I want to stay at home, usually." Li Daoji's thin eyebrows immediately rose. He suddenly turned around. He did not refuse or agree. He looked coldly at Ding Ning and said, "Go in and see." Ding Ning sensed the strangeness in Li Daoji's expression and tone. A hint of shock flashed through his eyes. He did not say anything else and walked towards the grass hut Li Daoji had pointed out. The roof of the grass hut was made from ordinary straw and some yellow mud. The door was the most ordinary wooden door. Yet before Ding Ning's finger touched the wooden door, his body imperceptibly shook. There was the sound of water in this grass hut. He slowly took a breath and pushed open the unlocked wooden door. The decorations of the grass hut were extremely simple. There was only a bed by the window with the simplest bedding. In front of the bed, there was a straw cushion used for meditation. The sound of water came from under the meditation mat. Sensing the unusual and fresh presence in this grass hut, Ding Ning could faintly guess the result. His heart beat faster than usual. He took another deep breath, walked forward, and moved away the thick straw meditation mat. He saw a fist-sized spring in the middle of the rocks below his praying mat. The spring water rippled as though it was boiling, and occasionally released threads of milky white spirit energy. Each thread of spirit energy was like a small white goat horn. This was the legendary spirit vein. In the cultivation world, thousands of years ago, most of the wars that occurred were due to fighting over spirit veins. Now, in the Qin dynasty and the surrounding dynasties, spirit veins were extremely rare. For those sects that possessed spirit veins, only their most important disciples could use spirit veins to cultivate. Also, this spirit vein was far from the spirit vein of White Goat Cave that he had heard of. Ding Ning turned around. He looked at Li Daoji in hopes of receiving an answer. Seeing his puzzled gaze, Li Daoji misunderstood and said expressionlessly, "This is the legendary spirit vein. The spirit energy coming out of the spirit vein will enter the cultivator's body along with their breathing. It will be very beneficial, just like some pills that can increase the speed of cultivation. But even more importantly, this spirit energy is the purest product of the world. There are no impurities, and it will not have side effects like some pills." "I know." Ding Ning looked at him and shook his head. "I do not mean this. I know spirit veins are very powerful, but don't only direct disciples who have passed through many tests qualify to use spirit veins to cultivate. Otherwise, what if I become a rebellious disciple and betray my master and ancestors?" Hearing his words, a cold and disdainful expression appeared at the corners of Li Daoji's mouth. "White Goat Cave is gone. Where can you rebel?" It sounded like a hopeless situation, but at this moment, it was filled with an unruly domineering aura and courage. Ding Ning grimaced and looked seriously at the small spirit vein and the grass meditation mat that could absorb spirit energy. He asked, "This is a spirit vein, but why is this spirit vein so different from the legendary spirit veins? Why is it so small?" Li Daoji's expression froze, and he did not respond. Sect Uncle Li Daoji. Ding Ning was silent for a moment, and then looked more seriously at him. He asked softly, "I heard that White Goat Cave merged into the Green Vine Sword Academy because we offended the Empress. How did White Goat Cave offend her? Where did you hear such words?" Li Daoji's expression suddenly changed, and a hint of murderousness flashed through his eyes. "If you want to live longer, it is best not to mention such things." Ding Ning did not feel terror. He looked calmly at Li Daoji's murderous eyes and murmured softly, "If not for offending her, even if White Goat Cave did not produce any powerful cultivators with a spirit vein, how could it merge with the Green Vine Sword Academy? Even Wang Taishu knows that you offended her, but he does not know how. Otherwise, I would not have asked you. As to whether I want to live longer, I do not have long to live." Li Daoji's gaze had grown sharper, but at his last words, Li Daoji frowned and suddenly felt his words were reasonable. The murderousness in his eyes started to dissipate. "You do not have long to live, but when I can live, I want to live for a few more years. So I did not say anything. What you heard must be an illusion." He said slowly and coldly, "She wants to plant a spirit lotus in the spirit spring of White Goat Cave. The fruit of the spirit lotus can be used to make some very useful breakthrough pills. In reality, she just wants to see our attitude because she always felt there was something wrong with our attitude. Spirit veins are rare, but with her abilities, she does not lack one. However, our sect uncle Du Qingjiao and the cave master were not willing to agree because that kind of spirit lotus will absorb large amounts of spirit energy from the spirit vein and cause the spirit vein to dry up. Therefore, before we sensed that she had such intentions, Marshal Uncle Du Qingjiao had already divided our spirit veins into 3 small portions. This is a kind of self-destruction, but each portion of the spirit vein is not enough to maintain the growth of the spirit lotus. Ding Ning was slightly dazed. He had not expected the white-haired old man who had left White Goat Cave to make such a choice. This is not an attitude of dying in glory rather than living in dishonor. White Goat Cave does not want to offend anyone. Li Daoji looked at the pitifully small spirit vein and slowly narrowed his eyes. We only do what we think is just and right. The spirit vein is small, but it can be left behind. At least it can be of some use to the disciples of White Goat Cave. I want to go home. Ding Ning nodded, and then said seriously. Li Daoji's hand instinctively touched the hilt of his sword and almost pulled it out to cut. He did not dare to believe that a person who knew there was a spirit vein in this place and had heard so many things would tell him to go home at this time. I know you cultivate quickly, but do you feel that cultivating in a place like Falling Parasol is better than sitting on a spirit vein? His chest rose and fell as he suppressed his emotions and said coldly. Ding Ning looked seriously and innocently at him. He said, I know, but I can cultivate here during the day. I will sleep better when I return at night. Li Daoji naturally did not know what he was truly thinking. Looking at the serious Ding Ning, he turned in anger and left. Not opposing was silent agreement. Ding Ning laughed happily and shouted at the others back, Then prepare a carriage for me. When Li Daoji was about to draw his sword again, in the library cave, Nangong Kaishu had finished reading Theory of Opening Heaven. She was reading the 2nd book, Notes of the Banana Pond Master of Ba Mountain. The more she read, the paler her face became. The owners of these 2 books must not have been powerful cultivators. The notes were messy, and many places were just guesses and temporary comprehensions during cultivation. But most of the records were descriptions of primal energies of the universe. Most importantly, the owners of these 2 books were very humble in their attitudes towards primal energies of the universe, and were very similar. The owner of Theory of Opening Heaven compared himself to an empty bottle praying to the heavens. His cultivation process was like this empty bottle praying to the heavens to bestow some primal energies of the universe into his bottle. Notes of the Banana Pond Master of Ba Mountain said that when he was comprehending the primal energies of the universe, it was raining. Chapter 41. Falling Parasol was very quiet. Occasionally, the barks of dogs echoed in the doorway in the autumn night. Ding Ning pushed open the wooden door of the wine shop and walked into the unlit wine shop. The furnishings of the wine shop were the same as usual, but Ding Ning's brow quickly furrowed deeply, and he felt a hint of coldness. Previously, when he and Zhangsun Qianxue had been talking here and cultivating here, they had not been on guard at all. That was because he knew that in Chongling, other than a rare few people, no one could escape Zhangsun Qianxue's perception when they walked into this alley. If those people really entered this alley, then there was no difference whether they were on guard or not. Now, Zhangsun Qianxue had not come out of the rear courtyard. He could not sense any presence of Zhangsun Qianxue. Zhangsun Qianxue was not in the wine shop. The reason he had to come back was because he feared something would happen to Zhangsun Qianxue. In the past many years, he and Zhangsun Qianxue had gotten used to their own existences. Zhangsun Qianxue's cultivation was enough to kill countless of him in an instant. But this was Chongling. Even the most powerful cultivator had countless possibilities of being killed. She was like a blank piece of paper on how to live in Chongling and how to walk in Chongling. Ding Ning lifted the curtain to the rear courtyard. His heart grew colder. Zhang Sun Qianxue was not in the rear courtyard. Where did she go? Ding Ning stood motionlessly in the center of the rear courtyard. After dozens of breaths, he silently walked into the kitchen at the side and started to cook noodles. When the water started to boil and he put the noodles in, Ding Ning saw his hands tremble slightly. He could not see his face at this time, but he was certain that even under the warm light of the fire, his face was pale. He knew that in Chongling at this time, he had weaknesses. Zhang Sun Qianxue was his greatest weakness. Nothing could happen to her, so he lit the fire. He hoped that in the dark night, Zhang Sun Qianxue could see the sparks coming out of the chimney and understand that he had returned. The snowy white noodles gradually floated up in the boiling water. He did not add any seasoning. He scooped the noodles into his special bowl and started to eat. While he ate noodles with thick soup and red sauce every morning at the door of the shop, this kind of clear water without any seasoning was the taste he was most used to. The broth was hot, but hearing the wind in the surrounding streets, his heart grew colder. If Zhang Sun Qianxue left now, how much time would he have to spend before he could appear by her side again? In the white steam rising from the noodle bowl, his face looked so young, but it was filled with endless sorrow. Suddenly, the steam rising from the noodle bowl became slightly distorted. Ding Ning suddenly looked up. These unusually ambiguous words were still unusually cold from her mouth, and even carried an unsurpassable murderousness. But looking at her back, Ding Ning's body started to warm up. The night in the mountains was as cold as water. On a slope not far from White Goat Gorge, there was a cluster of green halls. The palace itself was built with gray mountain rocks, but because the outer walls were entwined with very old green vines, it appeared green in the dark night. In the deepest part of the palace, there was a palace covered with countless sword marks under the green vines. A gorgeous blanket made of the best wool made the entire palace appear warm even in the thick autumn air. A slender old man, with white hair coiled up with a green jade hairpin, looked extremely clean. Even his fingernails were neatly trimmed. His eyebrows were slightly green, his eyes slightly sunken. His expression was calm, but still dignified. He was the principal of Green Vine Sword Academy, Di Qingmei. At this moment, he was staring coldly at a memo in his hand. A cold and disdainful smile slowly appeared at the corners of his mouth. White Goat Cave Shui Wangshu and Du Qingjiao, these two old fools, have always been stubborn. Even after seeing so many bloody things in the first year of Yuan Wu, they did not repent. Now that they belong to our Green Vine Sword Academy, Shui Wangshu, this old fool, actually thought of such a move. He said that since the two sects have merged into one, the Green Vine Sword Academy disciples and White Goat Cave disciples are no different. Then White Goat Cave disciples can attend our sword trial festival, and now he wants our green suet jade. Sitting across from Di Qingmei was a middle-aged man in green robes with two swords on his back. This middle-aged man in green robes was his only direct disciple up until now, Duanmu Lian. Hearing the dignified old man's cold laugh, Duanmu Lian frowned slightly and said gravely, "Then, Master, will you agree to his request?" "Of course I will agree." The dignified old man said disdainfully, "If I do not agree to his request, how can I trap him and seek his spirit vein?" Spirit vein? A strange light flashed through Duanmu Lian's eyes. Du Qingjiao and Shui Wangshu, these two old fools, before the Empress expressed her intentions, they had already split the White Goat Cave spirit vein into 3 strands. But they think they can keep their spirit vein like this? Di Qingmei sneered. The Empress finally found their mistakes elsewhere and gave White Goat Cave to us. If we let them keep the 3 spirit veins, how can the Empress be satisfied with us? Shui Wangshu wants to leave the 3 spirit veins for White Goat Cave to use. We cannot let him do as he wishes. Di Qingmei looked at Duanmu Lian in front of him and said slowly, "Go and reply to Shui Wangshu for me. Tell him I agree to his request, but these 3 spirit springs will be shared by the Green Vine Sword Academy and White Goat Cave." After saying this, he saw Su Qin's expression grow uglier. The young teacher helplessly said in a voice only the 2 of them could hear, "I am only responsible for passing on the message. Also, Cave Master has put you among the 3. You already qualify to use the spirit vein to cultivate. Why do you have to care who the other 2 are? You can only use 1 spirit vein." This young teacher felt that he had spoken reasonably and even put himself in the position of a lowly person. Yet, unexpectedly, Su Qin's expression grew even colder. "This is not a matter of how many spirit veins I can use, but a matter of fairness. You should know that using the spirit vein to cultivate is the highest reward of White Goat Cave. If it is casually given to a new disciple, then who in the sect will truly work for the sect in the future?" His voice was not loud, but cold and clear. It spread far on the mountain path into the ears of many White Goat Cave disciples who were working hard on cultivation. The young teacher's expression gradually changed. He started to understand why Su Qin had been showing off more and more recently, and his performance in the sect had grown stronger. Because White Goat Cave had joined the Green Vine Sword Academy. Because White Goat Cave's previous existence was not recognized by the Empress and the dynasty. If he could have the majority of White Goat Cave stand behind him, then he could become the master of White Goat Cave in the future and easily climb to a higher stage in Chongling. "Your ambition came too quickly and too early," the young teacher scolded in a low voice with an ugly expression. Su Qin smiled coldly. He glanced at the increasing number of White Goat Cave students gathered around him out of the corner of his eyes. His voice was very low. "I heard that people must have ambition to live. I also heard that carps need to use power to jump over the Dragon Gate. I also heard that if a person wants to become famous, they have to do it early." The young teacher's expression grew uglier. Yet when he saw more and more angry eyes waiting for an answer, he panicked slightly and did not know what to do. The cave master made such an arrangement because he has sufficient qualifications. At this moment, a cold and emotionless voice sounded from behind the young instructor. Everyone's gaze gathered on Li Daoji, who walked out of the thin mist. Li Daoji's sword hilt in front of him still gave off a faint red light that shook people's souls. The hundreds of White Goat Cave students gathered nearby stilled slightly, but there was a terrifying presence in the silence that could explode at any moment. Su Qin smiled slightly. He felt that no matter the result today, he would gain more prestige. What qualifications? He looked disdainfully at the sword hilt in front of Li Daoji's chest. He thought inside, "Even if you are stronger than me now, I will definitely surpass you in the near future." Chapter 43. Profound Understanding in Half a Day. This was more shocking news than a student of White Goat Cave being able to attend the Green Vine Sword Academy's Sword Trial Festival. Also, this kind of shock was not limited to White Goat Cave. Yet Ding Ning's figure that caused this shock waited until late in the morning before he appeared on the mountain path of White Goat Cave. Is this a joke? On the mountain path, not far from the library cave, Ding Ning looked at the expressionless Li Daoji and said with a frown, "Yesterday, you told me I could use that spirit vein to cultivate. Just one night later, you tell me that spirit vein belongs to the winner of the Sword Trial Festival. Isn't this change too fast?" Li Daoji looked coldly at Ding Ning and said, "There is still a month before the Sword Trial Festival. This spirit vein still belongs to you. If you think the change is too fast, you should have listened to me yesterday and used the time to cultivate using the spirit vein. You should not have stayed in Falling Parasol and spent so much time on the road. Ding Ning looked at Li Daoji, whose eyes were filled with discontent, and said, I was not idle on the way back. I studied the Wildfire Sword Manual. Li Daoji said disdainfully, in such a short time, you memorized some of the contents of the Wildfire Sword Manual. Ding Ning nodded. A hint of anger flashed through Li Daoji's eyes, but he did not immediately say anything. He broke off a branch from the mountain wall beside him and held it in front of Ding Ning. Then he motioned for Ding Ning to go over to a platform less than 10 feet wide. Since this is the case, why don't you practice for me to see? All right. Ding Ning did not refuse. Holding the small branch, he stepped onto the platform and started to wave it. The small branch in his hand looked laughable, with some young leaves at the tip. Li Daoji purposely made him look ridiculous, so he didn't even cut off those young leaves. Arrogance was taboo in cultivation. The Wildfire Sword Manual was more complex than most of the sword manuals of White Goat Cave. Many sword moves were made from many sword moves connected together. One sword move had many variations. Even if he studied the Wildfire Sword Manual himself, he could not remember so much in a short day and comprehend it. However, the moment Ding Ning raised his hand, a bolt of lightning flashed through his eyes that were filled with ridicule, and his face instantly froze. The seemingly ridiculous twig suddenly formed a semicircle in front of Ding Ning. In the next moment, the air was filled with the sound of something breaking through the air. The twigs transformed into countless tiny sword shadows, enveloping the area a few feet in front of Ding Ning. The sword shadows were dense, and most of them were concentrated below Ding Ning's waist, as if a dense grassland had suddenly appeared on the ground in front of him. The shock in Li Daoji's eyes grew, and his eyebrows twitched. He had never read the Wildfire Sword Manual, but he could see that this was the starting sword move of the Wildfire Sword Manual. While Ding Ning's sword move had many flaws in his eyes, he could feel the true sword essence. It was just a sword move, but he felt like a wildfire was about to rise from the grassland. This was the essence. The sword move was not perfect, and the position of the sword in the air was slightly off at every moment. This could be improved through practice, but the essence of sword essence could not be comprehended through simple practice. He was the best swordsman in White Goat Cave other than Cave Master Shui Wangshu. So he knew that only swordsmen who had the essence could express the true power of the sword. In battle, they would naturally have the sword follow the sword essence and appear where it should appear. At this moment, what shocked him the most was that even the few ridiculous leaves on the branch seemed to have a unique charm. It gave him a strange feeling, completely different from the wildfire in the prairie. It was thriving, and there was a lingering sword intent. Maybe I should acknowledge your cultivation method, but starting today, if you want to leave the mountain, I will arrange a faster carriage for you. He took a deep breath, looked at Ding Ning, who had stopped, and said this. Then he turned and left without saying anything else. Thank you, said Uncle Li Daoji. Looking at Li Daoji's back, Ding Ning thanked him seriously. There was no pride in his eyes, but a hint of inexplicable coldness. Yesterday, his cultivation in White Goat Cave had been very smooth. But now, everything did not appear to be as smooth as he had imagined. Di Qingmei of the Green Vine Sword Academy was at odds with Shui Wangshu and Du Qingjiao, as the rumors said. In order to satisfy the Empress in the Imperial Palace and let her see his attitude, he had to do more. Actually, usually no matter how you fight with White Goat Cave, I will not interfere. I have an entire wall. I do not have the ability to manage matters here. But now, this matter concerns my cultivation. You gave me the spirit vein yesterday, and just last night you want to take it away from me. I am very unhappy. Ding Ning threw down the twig in his hand and looked in the direction of the Green Vine Sword Academy. He said softly and seriously inside. At this moment, he was really unhappy. He was unhappy because of the Moore incidents, unhappy because of the distant names that had appeared in his mind recently. Ding Ning. At this time, he heard someone call him. Nangong Kaishu ran towards him under the sunlight. She looked at Ding Ning, who was standing on the platform and looking into the distance. Her body trembled slightly. She ran in front of Ding Ning and said in a trembling voice, "Ding Ning, you really are a great monster." Ding Ning gathered his thoughts. He looked at her excited expression that was completely different from when she looked at him. He knew that this young woman had definitely gained a lot in her comprehension of the primal energies of the universe. So he asked calmly, "Are those 2 books useful?" "I do not know why you feel those 2 books are useful, but they are useful to me." Nangong Kaishu still could not calm down. She said in a trembling voice, "I will quickly reach Realm 2. Ding Ning said softly, "It is best if I can help you. You spoke for me at the mountain gates. This way, I will not owe you anything." Nangong Kaishu stilled. Her eyes were filled with incomprehension and even a hint of anger. How is this the same thing? She looked straight into Ding Ning's eyes, her face flushing slightly. "What do you mean you do not owe me anything? I spoke a few words for you on the mountain path. How can it compare to this? This kind of cultivation matter. Your help might have saved me 7 years of time, or even more than that." Ding Ning looked at the excited her, frowned slightly, and was silent for a moment. "Maybe you feel that you are a disciple of White Goat Cave and are naturally distant from me, a student of Green Vine Sword Academy. But I will not care about these matters. Even if you do not think of me as a friend now, I must thank you." Nangong Saishu's expression grew even more serious. She even bowed seriously to Ding Ning. "You have told me about your body. I know your cultivation is more urgent than ordinary people, so I hope that if you need any help, you will tell me." Ding Ning's brows furrowed even tighter. He thought and said, "If you really want to help me, then promise me that you will not tell anyone that the 2 books I helped you pick out helped you, including your teacher and your father." Nangong Kaishu stilled. She looked in puzzlement at Ding Ning and asked, "Why?" "If one's cultivation advances quickly, I fear that it will cause unnecessary trouble." Ding Ning said calmly, "If a person who advances quickly is thought to have strong intuition and comprehension of cultivation records, then it will be even more troublesome. You know that I do not have much time. I do not have time to be used by others. For me, I need to spend all my time on my cultivation advancement." Nangong Kaishu did not know what Ding Ning was truly thinking, but she felt that Ding Ning's words were correct. She knew that those geniuses who were called freaks would face more challenges and worldly chores after their talents were revealed. Those people's future pursuits would mostly be higher positions in Changling. Those challenges and chores would help them reach higher positions in the future. They also had enough time to manage these things, but Ding Ning did not. "I promise you, I swear I will not tell anyone that the 2 books you picked helped me. I will find another reason." Nangong Kaishu nodded seriously. Then she stubbornly raised her head and looked at Ding Ning. "But this is not enough. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Looking at this young woman who wanted to help him, Ding Ning felt a headache, but he still thought carefully. "Is there a pill medicine that can increase cultivation?" He thought for a moment and said. Then he felt that he was slightly shameless. Nangong Kaishu stilled. If it were someone else who said this, she would definitely feel that it was shameless. Even if pills that increased cultivation had some long-term negative effects, and in the legends would have a greater effect on the breakthroughs of cultivators after Realm 7 because they could quickly change a cultivator's body, increase their cultivation, and even save time on breakthroughs. Any pill medicine related to increasing cultivation was the most precious treasure in the world. A pill medicine like this was a great treasure for a cultivator of Nangong Saishu's background. Usually, when they obtained a pill medicine like this, they would use it themselves and not give it to others. But Ding Ning's body did not cause Nangong Kaishu to have the thought of being shameless. She naturally felt that this could help Ding Ning cultivate faster and save some of his lifespan. I will think of a way and do my best. After a moment of shock, she solemnly patted her chest and promised, "Thank you." A strange feeling rose in Ding Ning's eyes. He thanked her seriously and then said softly, "Then can you please tell me about your Green Vine Sword Academy's Sword Trial Festival? What is it like?" You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.